Hey everyone, it's Crowder9 here. Today we're going to be talking about side deck choices in Yu-Gi-Oh! And when you should be using them. This will be a series, and the first thing we're going to be discussing, at least in this video, is going to be board wipe oriented cards. This will include monsters and back row. These cards aren't always main decked and can generally be used in the majority of side decks. As a general reminder, if you're going to be playing any of the trap options, Trap Trick is an amazing card to turbo out some of the trap cards in this video. So starting off, the first card a lot of current players are familiar with is Nibiru the Primal Being. During the main phase, including main phase 2, if your opponent had summoned 5 or more monsters this turn, you can tribute as many face-up monsters on the board, including yours, and then special summon it to your side of the field and give your opponent a token with the attack and defense of all monsters added up respectively to the attack and defense stat. You're able to choose if you want to put it in attack or defense and to what zone it can go in. This card is amazing for the fact that a lot of players cannot continue their plays after it was summoned. They've committed a lot of resources to have you tribute them all away. Do keep in mind, however, some decks can indeed continue their plays, but you also don't want to wait too long for them to set up a monster negate, leaving your Nibiru wasted in hand. The Winged Dragon Aura Sphere Mode is one that comes in and out depending on the meta. You're able to tribute 3 monsters on your opponent's field and summon Sphere Mode out to their side of the board. This gets rid of big threats without you activating any kind of effects. Keep in mind, this does eat up your normal summon for the turn. On your opponent's end phase, you do get Sphere Mode back to your side of the field, but keep in mind one thing, Sphere Mode cannot be targeted for attacks or effects, so if you're trying to win that turn, you're gonna have to play around that. There's a neat little effect that almost never really gets used, but you can tribute Sphere Mode if it's on your side of the field and summon out the Winged Dragon Aura from your deck or your hand, and it'll have 4000 attack and defense. The decks that can primarily use this to the best advantage are decks that do not need to normal summon, and primarily special summon, so keep that in mind for your side deck planning. Lava Golem is similar to Sphere Mode. It'll eat up your normal summon, however you're able to tribute 2 of your opponent's monsters. The benefit due to time rules is that your opponent will take 1000 life point damage during their standby phase while this card is face up on their field. So again, very similar to Sphere Mode, great alternative if you only want to deal with 2 monsters as opposed to 3, but it does eat up your normal summon, so keep that in mind. Gameciel the Sea Turtle Kaiju is the lowest attack Kaiju monster available at this time. Gameciel lets you only tribute 1 monster your opponent controls, however it will not eat up your normal summon, which is great for decks that do rely on their normal summon. Also, if you happen to have 2 Kaiju monsters in your hand, you're able to give 1 to your opponent by tributing 1 of their monsters, and then special summon 1 to your side of the field. There is a secondary effect that Gameciel has that is an Omni Negate, but you need Kaiju counters, which is only available with things such as the Kaiju Field card, Kyoto Waterfront. However, this is not an effect you'll be seeing getting played, but hey, if your opponent has Waterfront with counters, you're able to use their counters for the effect. So again, this is great for decks that will primarily want to go second, get rid of some kind of threat on the board, but also need their normal summon to keep their plays going. So that pretty much covers all monsters that you can side deck that clears some kind of board presence. Now let's move on to the spells and traps. First up, we have Dark Ruler No More. This card negates all effects of face-up monsters your opponent currently controls until the end of the turn. Your opponent cannot respond to the activation of Dark Ruler No More with monster effects. They can still activate spells and traps in response, however. The only downside of this card is that your opponent takes no damage for the rest of this turn. However, you can still break their board and then build one of your own. Do not forget that your opponent can still activate monster effects from their hand as well as their graveyard for that turn. It's just that the monsters on the field at that time cannot activate their effects. That means you're going to be primarily siding this against very combo heavy decks that build up a lot of negates, or a flood deck that might set up a lot of monster floodgates that you need to get through. Lightning Storm is next on the list. Being a combination of 2 classic cards, Lightning Vortex and Harpy's Feather Duster, this card is incredibly strong to just go ahead and wipe your opponent's board, and lets you pick the bigger threat at that time. Great against back row decks, great against combo decks, It can clear your opponent's attack position monsters or their entire spell and trap card zones. The downside here is that you cannot activate Lightning Storm if you have a face-up card on the board already, meaning if you have a set monster and a few face-down spells and traps, you're good to go with using it. Only one Lightning Storm can be used each turn unless the activation is negated, so if you draw multiple, choose what the bigger threat is at the time. Again, do keep in mind, as I mentioned, this is for attack position monsters, so if they have defense position monsters, you may be better off holding it out a little bit longer or go for their back row if they have any. Sticking with the board wipe theme, we have 3 cards on this one. We have Raigeki, Lightning Vortex, and Dark Hole. Raigeki clears all monsters on your opponent's side of the field, including said monsters. Dark Hole does the same thing, however it includes your monsters as well. Some decks can utilize the destruction effect of your own board, so it may benefit you if your cards have the destroyed by an effect condition, or it even may benefit if your deck is primarily used in the graveyard. Lightning Vortex clears your opponent's attack position monsters. However, you do need to discard a card from your hand in order to use it, which again, a lot of decks can utilize in a going second strategy. Raigeki is currently at 1 in the TCG, but I consider it to be an incredibly underrated card. I wouldn't run either of these cards in a format that has a lot of board protection, such as Orcus with Dingirisu, Salamangreat with Balinx. Otherwise, honestly, all 3 of these cards can easily sneak some wins in. Something to complement the Kaijus you might be running is Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. This lets you destroy as many monsters on the board as possible, then you can special summon 2 Kaijus from your deck, 1 to your opponent's side of the field and then 1 to yours. If you're running more than 2 Kaijus in your deck, you can also banish this card your following turn and search out another Kaiju to tribute one of your opponent's monsters. It's a board wipe and it's also spot removal the following turn. This would be similar to the above board wipes, in which you want to make sure your opponent's monsters can be destroyed by card effect, but it lets you get some board presence as well. Super Polymerization, not too long ago, this card was banned. When you activate it, you do need to discard a card for cost. From there, you're able to fusion summon using all monsters on the board, assuming they're able to be affected by card effects. Your opponent is not able to respond to this card with anything. Monster effects, spells, traps, it does not matter. It's also a quick play spell, and can be used as disruption on your opponent's turn if you had set the card. Some good generic targets are Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, Mud Dragon of the Swamp, and Earth Golem Adignister. This card is incredible board disruption and board breaking. A good option for fusion decks, or a good option for decks that don't really need too many spots in their extra deck, and can throw in some fusions, again, mostly for disruption. So for a trap variant of some board removal, we do have Torrential Tribute. When a monster is summoned, you're able to activate it and destroy all monsters currently on the field. If you have a deck that can benefit from this or survive with Torrential Tribute, it's a great way to break or even hurt your opponent's board on their turn. The next category of cards we will focus on is back row removal. Starting off this section, we have Mystical Space Typhoon. You're able to activate this card on your turn as a quick effect, or your opponent's turn if you had set it the turn prior. It allows you to target and destroy a spell or trap card on the field. Simple and well, to the point. It's a 1-for-1 in removal. It benefits to have MST available when you have a card on your side of the field that, once it's destroyed, gains some kind of effect in the graveyard. Sky Strikers benefited a lot from this card, as it would destroy their field card and special summon a Ray from their deck and allows their plays to continue. Keep in mind, you want to run this card again for versatility, so you want to be able to destroy your opponent's field, but also have some kind of interaction with your cards as well. Galaxy Cyclone is interesting. You're able to target one set spell or trap card and then have it destroyed. The following turn, you can banish Galaxy Cyclone and destroy one face-up spell or trap. This gives you options to destroy a back row initially on your turn, and then say a continuous spell or trap card, or even a field card, on your next turn. This is great for strategies that might be using Mystic Mine or stun cards such as Rivalry, Gozen, etc. Do keep in mind, it is a normal spell card, it is not a quick play, so you would only be able to use either of these effects on your turn. Cosmic Cyclone is one of the more popular spell and trap card removals currently in the game. At the cost of 1000 life points, you're able to target a spell or trap card on the field and have it banished. This is a quick effect. It's really good against decks that rely on graveyard effects for their spell and trap cards, so you're able to do some board removal, you're able to get that card banished, and you're able to stop their plays from continuing if, again, they are an eccentric deck like that. Also, just generally good on decks that can recur back their spell and trap cards from the graveyard to their hand or back to their side of the field. Following that, we have Twin Twisters. At the cost of 1 card in your hand, you're able to destroy 2 spells and traps on your opponent's side of the field. This is great for back row removal if you need to do more than just a 1-for-1 trade-off. Technically, it is a 2-for-2 since you are discarding a card in your hand, and it is a cost, so keep that in mind. It will not trigger any effects that are not cost related. And then from there on, you're able to just break your opponent's board and continue your plays. Again, really good for back row heavy formats in which you need to get as much back row removed. Hatronade is a good way to get rid of your opponent's back row, and instead of destroying it, just put it back into their hand. This will force them to activate all their cards on the board at that time, or have it put back into their hand, so you're able to see what they have if they're going to be activating anything. Again, if they activate, for example, there can only be 1, they would be able to keep that card, but the remainder of the field would have to go back to their hand if it's not activated and it stays face down. Now you know what you're working with, you're able to pop, find a way to break that card, and move on with your turn. Again, it's a great option for non-destruction, and if your opponent has no responses to it, you have a clear back row. Heavy Storm Duster is some back row removal in the form of a trap card. If you want some removal on your opponent's turn, you can set it, and on your opponent's turn, destroy important combo pieces, or on their end phase, clear their board and gain some advantage. The downside is when this card is used on your turn, you do lose your battle phase. So keep that in mind, understand it is a 2-for-1, you do lose your battle phase if you activate on your turn, but if you're going first and you're able to set this card, honestly, it can do some great damage to your opponent's board. Typhoon finds itself in a more pendulum-centric meta, so keep that in mind. You're able to target a face-up spell or trap card and destroy it, and the benefit is that it's a pseudo hand trap. If you're going second and your opponent is playing pendulums or a deck that has a lot of continuous face-ups, you can activate this card from your hand on your opponent's turn. Keep in mind that this card only works on face-ups, but against certain matchups, this card is incredibly deadly and can end a lot of turns. Unending Nightmare is something I wanted to throw in since it always peaks around whenever we have a meta around pendulums, but this is generally a really good card too. At the cost of 1000 life points, you can target 1 face-up spell trap on the field and destroy it. This can be done once per chain, but it gives you options for multiple card pops that turn. Just something to keep in mind and have around in case we ever see a format where pendulums are dominant again. Last but not least, we have the classic Evenly Matched. This card can be used for monster and back row removal. Sacrificing your battle phase, this card can be used straight from your hand, but also on your opponent's turn if they end and you have nothing on your board. When activated, your opponent banishes face down cards on their field equal to what you have on your field. So if all you have is evenly matched, they have to leave 1 card on the field and banish the rest of them face down. This card alone can win games as your opponent may have used all their resources to make the board they have, and once they have it broken, there's no recovery. Generally a side deck staple among most formats. Thanks to everyone who watched the video. There will be more entries in the side deck, main deck, theories, and suggestions, as well as suggestions for a lot more coming up soon. Until then, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss whatever I may be posting next. Again, thank you very much for your time, I really do appreciate it. Hope this video helped you out, and take care and stay safe.